All right, guys. Just waiting for some people to connect to audio. So welcome to everybody who's joining us. We expect some people to be kind of joining in the middle. We're going to record this and push it out through some of the social stuff. So we'll also be able to send this the YouTube video of this as a link. If you want to get any of this information later, don't feel like it's something you have to take notes on every little thing that we go through. So I'm excited to be joined here tonight by Scott Flynn. Scott is a first year, second year
Second
med
year.
student, second year med
Yep.
student at Tufts. He's also my younger brother, but we were just talking as we kind of came in, just the amount of test prep that he is encountering in a day-to-day life in his current profession, but he also has extensive experience with tutoring, the SAT, ACT, and kind of all aspects of that. So that's going to be what we talk about today. First, kind of from a global perspective, don't know maybe what your background is or what you've been told in terms of the timing of some of these tests, and then also just some kind of insider tips. So with that, what I would like to just kind of go through with everybody, these are just kind of some general guidelines that we put together at Centercourt. And if you have any questions as they come up, please just feel free to throw them into the chat. I'm going to go pretty fast here, but I think there's a general sense that obviously, first thing I should say is everybody's different. Everybody's recruiting situation is going to be different. So don't feel like this is a one size fits all, but I think this kind of gives you maybe a general sense. And if you're way off from on either one side or the other of this, then maybe gives you a little bit of perspective or knowledge. So first of all, as you go through your high school career, these are four elements that I think you should really be thinking about and planning for. You should be thinking about taking 2 to 3 SATs or ACTs. You should identify pretty early on, somewhere in your sophomore, junior year, whether you're going to focus on studying for the SATs or the ACTs. And that's kind of a whole thing in of itself. So I don't want to take too much time with that, but it is preferable to sort of target your study and to go from there. In the senior year, you really want to think about your essays and your personal statements and workshopping them and having that really be on point and targeted to the schools that you're focusing on. AP prep is obviously very important because now, and actually they just announced that they're getting rid of the SAT2 subject tests. So there's no longer an SAT, which I don't know if you knew that, Scott, but that came out like 2 days ago. The College Board just released that. So that is going to put a little bit more emphasis on the AP prep because that's going to be where the scores are from. They announced that there's going to be no SAT essay anymore, or the S that would be elected, or that it was elected, but they're not going to use it anymore. So things like your AP language and comp score, any AP lit, anything where you're going to show any writing skills, and even your personal essay, those are going to be probably of heightened significance. And then interview prep, being able to nail that interview and be able to do mock interviews and get feedback on your public speaking skills. That's something I think is kind of an undercoached part of college admissions process. So just to kind of take you through general guidelines, if you're thinking about the beginning of the year, this is, we're going to talk about some of these early dates: August, September, SAT and ACT dates. Obviously, you have the early decision deadlines coming up here in November. And then other dates that I think you should be thinking about targeting are going to be these April SATs and ACTs and June. And obviously you have the AP tests in the first 2 weeks of May, and the Common App deadlines in January. So just sort of general guidelines, general deadlines for everybody. And then we should say that in the junior year, September 1 is really the beginning of the recruiting process for Division I, for almost all Division I sports. So with that, sophomore year, I guess you could certainly do test prep as early as you want, but most people, we recommend that happening beginning in the sophomore year. Thinking about in the sophomore year, if you are taking AP tests, to think about preparing for that in March. Your teachers probably are already involved in that. You can study for the PSATs. You can tutor for the PSATs. It's not generally done or recommended. They're national merit scholarships. So if you're a very high scorer, that may be something that you're thinking about. And then it's very helpful if you're trying to be a recruited Ivy League athlete. It's very helpful because the Ivy League recruiting process begins a lot earlier than other schools because there's a heavy academic influence. So it does help to have a ACT in June or earlier than I think some programs, so that you can start and you can really hit the recruiting running when you hit September. Well, as we mentioned, there's no more SAT2 subject tests, so that's not something you're going to study for. And really, I think the focus is, if you are a sophomore, in June and July, beginning some kind of tutoring, some kind of test prep sequence for that August SAT, ACT. So that's going to be the first one really that you look at, that is sort of that, like, all right, I got to gear up for this for the junior year, beginning of your junior year SAT, ACT. All right, because September 1, again, you as a student athlete can be formally recruited and contacted. So if I'm, and most of you, 99, whatever, I'm going to throw out a statistic, but 95% of people who play college sports are not going to be Division I athletes. But in order, so for you to be formally recruited on the Ivy League or Division III level, you're going to need an SAT or ACT as part of the process, obviously, and the GPA and all those things are part of the process. So if you have that ready to go for the college coach, as you're contacting them, as they're contacting you, it makes their job a lot easier because they need to know where you fit in admissions wise for them. So having that done by September 1 is important for those reasons. December, you're going to begin prep for your March SAT, and then as a retake. So basically, you're going to take it kind of high stakes in March. You can in September, you're going to retake it and thinking about it in the spring. And then in April 15th, the dead period is going to end and students can actually be visited in person by college coaches. You really need to have an SAT, ACT by then. And as you're going into in the summer and going into your senior year, you want to think about your personal statements, your college essays, what are you going to target? And then in June, thinking about that kind of last chance SAT, ACT, which will be in August going into your senior year. So obviously senior year, really you have that early date. You're looking at this, September, August, these dates here as kind of that last chance. Get that one done, get it graded so that you can hit this early decision with your third and feeling really strong third take of the SAT, ACT, and the tutoring or the test prep that's involved along with that. And then September and October, then December, February is really just kind of the interview process. So I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody. We do have remote tutoring that is available through Centercourt. So you can just reach out to me at rflynn@centercourt.com, centercourtclub.com. But, so with that kind of overview, just wanted to turn over to Scott to talk a little bit more about the kind of ins and outs of the actual tests and the tutoring process. Scott, what do you got?
Let me share my screen. Okay, got it. All right, put it in presenter mode. All right, so a little bit more background about myself. I grew up in New Jersey, went to Mountain Lakes High School. I was recruited by Cornell to play lacrosse there. Went through all the SAT prep stuff. Decided I wanted to go to medicine. Had to prep for the MCAT, and as I'm speaking, I'm prepping for the board examination. So, I've been through a lot of test prep, and I think the major point across, regardless of what you're studying for, and it's definitely true for the SAT as well, is that practice questions should be emphasized above all else. That's the single most important resource you can possibly utilize in your studying. I think, especially with the SAT, it is a content test in some ways, but it's really testing your thinking skills. And the more questions you can see, the better you're going to do, because there's only so many ways they can ask the same question. And with that kind of is, as you're getting questions wrong, because inevitably you will be, that can guide your future learning. If you're just trying to review things, kind of like a shotgun mentality, it's going to be extremely inefficient. So, as soon as you get a question wrong and you feel like your understanding of that topic may not be up to par, there's free resources online that I'll talk about in a little bit, that can get you up to speed and improve your score, rather quickly. Another thing I think people don't realize is, they might take a few different, just like 2 tests before the actual test day, in terms of just practice tests, not like signing up for them. But I would recommend getting involved super early and just kind of, looking at practice questions. And then as you're approaching your actual test day where you're going to sit for the exam, that's when you want to start doing, time sections that are simulating the test scenario. But there's no reason not to be, starting early, just getting your feet wet with questions. And another, I feel like often point that a lot of students don't take to heart is to rest before the exam. A lot of people are studying, I think, the day before or even 2 days before. And I think an important point for really all tests, this isn't just the SAT, any big test, is you want to kind of just relax the day before, because this is something I explain to my students a lot, is if you're being exposed to new material the day before, you're pigeonholing your thinking right before the test, right? So you want to go in as like a blank sheet with all the information you've gathered, but you don't want to be, reading into a question that you saw the day before. So you think it's going to go one way, and you're going to kind of, lead yourself down the wrong path that way. So it's important just to clean the slate, and have a blank mind kind of going into the test. So here are the, just some free materials on the SAT. It's not going to be anything really new to probably most of you, but I'll just talk about them a little bit because I think they're super important. There's 8 free practice tests on College Board and Khan Academy. They use the same tests. There's no reason why, if you really want to utilize every single test, if you really want to improve your score to the maximum it can go, there's no reason why you can't answer all these questions, or at least half of them. And that doesn't mean you're taking 8 practice tests, right? It doesn't mean that you're sitting down at 3 hours at a time and doing all of them, but it means that every single one of these questions was written by the College Board, right? So the more questions you can see from the College Board, the better. That's with a major caveat in that, you want to save 1 or 2 so that you can really, before you sit down for the test, simulate the test scenario and have like a time scenario where you're going through the test. But besides that, just, break it up into blocks. Just do the math calculator section one day, then maybe a couple days later, do another section, and just slowly make your way through the test until, as you start getting closer, you might just do, all right, I'm just going to do the math section timed, or I'm just going to do the math calculator section timed, or something like that, until you work your way up to doing the full test time, probably once I would say, at least before the exam. And the only reason why you want to do that, which is just the last point, is, it's really hard to gauge how quickly you're going and how much stamina you're going to have. A 3-hour test, especially in high school, is a very, very long test, or I forget exactly how long it is, but it's a long test, right? And you're not exposed to things like that before in your normal school test. So you don't know how you're going to react. You don't know how tired you're going to be. You're not going to know, whether you need a snack or whether you need coffee in the morning, or whether, coffee is going to make you need to get up in the middle of the exam or something like that. You want to, simulate all of that stuff before the exam so that you kind of have it down pat and you have your schedule down. So you're walking in as prepared as possible. And again, SAT is directly correlated with Khan. So, those videos will correlate very well with the material in the SAT. But as this kind of preludes to my next session, the ACTs, and I think Rob is exactly right. You definitely want to pick one and, do your prep in that section so that you can maximize your score. But in reality, right, the ACT and the SAT are very similar exams. The ACT does have the science section, which is a little different, but like a lot of the reading stuff is similar, right? So, I would say closest to the exam, you want to be doing strictly that stuff. But it won't hurt your score to, use other materials if you run out. That's if you run out. But so the ACT works a little differently in that they only really offer one free practice test, but they do offer a 5 test package in what's called their like official ACT prep guide, which is pretty cheap, only like $20 to $26. And that'll kind of get you on par with like the stuff the College Board gets you. And again, because it's similar to the SAT, the questions you're doing, you probably want to be tailored to the ACT, but you can still, I would say, use Khan Academy as just like a resource for you online for just to reinforce some of the topics you might not be as familiar with. Scheduling. All right. So kind of like how I touched on before, you can go through Khan Academy every single section and it will improve your score, undoubtedly. But that's a lot of time. You have, other schoolwork you need to work on, and it'll be extremely inefficient. So, you want to start, I think, early to recognize your weak points, just going through questions. And there's going to be, things on the math exam that you just totally forget, or algebra that you learned, 2 years ago. And you're going to need to go to a website like Khan Academy or even better with a tutor to reinforce that stuff. But you would rather find that out, 10 weeks before or a little bit before, just, no pressure going through questions, as opposed to, you're trying to shotgun all these exams 8 weeks and you realize like, you don't know like a vital formula you need for the test. Last thing, super specific, but I think it is important before test day is a lot of people will take like, a full length exam like 2 days before the test or like 3 days before the test. And I think that is, you're wasting one of the tests that they give you, and you don't want to waste the test because there's only 8 of them. And you're wasting, upwards of 150 questions or something like that. So if you're going to take a practice test before the exam, I would take it at least a week before, so that you can spend the rest of that week, if you're going to prepare, just going over like the wrong answers casually, just so you can actually absorb those wrong answers and not have it influence you on test day necessarily. And yeah, that's kind of my last thing. I would just say, the one place where tutors can come in, I think, is Khan Academy is obviously very static videos, and they're super useful. I think they're still underutilized by students because everyone knows about them, but not enough people utilize them. But at the same time, there's not someone there teaching you the ins and outs, and there's not someone really teaching you maybe SAT specific things about the test. A lot of the types of questions that keep popping up over and over again. A lot of SAT tutors who have a lot of experience know those types of questions and seen them many times, so they can kind of help you walk through SAT specific stuff like that. But other than that, there's a lot of material you can do on your own. You can definitely succeed on your own and get the score you want. Tutoring is just going to kind of be, the whipped cream on the Sunday. It's just going to kind of top off your score and try to get you to the maximum place possible.
Awesome. So we have a little bit of time. I see some people kind of have jumped in the middle as well. If you guys have any questions about, and I'm sure you do, I mean, that was a lot of information. If you have any questions Scott or myself, please, you can use the chat or you can just unmute yourself. Anybody want to start? I have a question actually for Scott too. Any questions to start? All right, well, maybe people are trying to get into the chat a little bit. Scott, as you know, we're waiting a little bit. At what point, so would you think about starting, you mentioned kind of, you used a really lovely analogy at the end there with the whipped cream and the tutoring, but like, so would you recommend starting with these practice tests and sort of going through them and creating, you know, maybe you do, would you say maybe like 3 or 4 and kind of getting a baseline knowledge of kind of what you need, like where your own weaknesses are, and then maybe turning to some tutoring, and maybe just kind of talk about that process a little bit of interweaving kind of some of that stuff, or how you would see that.
Yeah. So, you know, I think what you're really talking about is like a diagnostic, right? And I think Khan Academy does have a diagnostic feature, which would be super important. But yeah, you want to get your feet wet a little bit with questions because, you know, you might be a rock star at the math section and be really struggling in one, and you don't want to get necessarily a tutor in the math section if your, you know, score is already super high. So that is an important point. But another important point is that you don't want to do all of the questions before you start tutoring, because those are the most high yield questions. So you want to go through them with the tutor because they're going to be able to walk you through the most high yield questions that are going to pop up on the exam. So I would like maybe get your feet wet with an exam or 2, but then leave the rest for when you're going through it with a tutor.
Awesome. Other questions? Yeah, so just to reiterate too, I mean, and Scott, and you and I have talked a little bit about this just kind of through the journeys here, and just like, it's all about the test prep questions, right? It's all like, it is, and as you get older and you're prepping for the MCATs, I mean, you're just grinding questions, and I think it's really interesting, the SAT, like there's not that many to go around. So you really have to be, you almost have to plan backwards and say, all right, I know I have 8 tests. And so this is, you know, I'm this far out. So I'm going to use this here. I'm going to use this here, and have almost like a 12 or 18 month plan for how you're going to utilize those questions in your studying. So that's really great. Any other last kind of call for any questions from the group? Great. All right. Well, again, we do have some tutoring that we have available at Centercourt. It is remote. It is SAT, ACT. We do offer a diagnostic as part of that. So part of what you're going to find out is, should I study for the SAT or the ACT? And you can reach out to me directly, rflynn@centercourtclub.com. If you're interested in that. We think our rates are very reasonable, and our tutors are Ivy League, you know, they've scored within the 1% of test takers, much like Scott. So you're going to be paired with somebody who's very, very strong. And you know, good luck. It's a hard deal out there sometimes, but I think with some planning, you know, not everybody can certainly get a perfect score, but hopefully you can improve your score and get done what you need to get done. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. Scott, thank you very much for sharing your expertise, and have a great night.
Bye, guys.